Marcus Chen stared at his physics textbook, the equations blurring together as exhaustion weighed down his eyelids. The university library buzzed with the quiet desperation of students cramming for finals. At 22, Marcus was just another face in the crowd. Average grades, average social life, average everything. His biggest accomplishment this semester was managing to stay awake through Professor Williams' mind-numbing lectures on quantum mechanics. The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m. Most students had already left for the night, but Marcus needed every extra minute to understand the complex formulas that seemed to dance mockingly on the pages. His scholarship depended on maintaining decent grades, and decent was becoming harder to achieve with each passing semester. A strange humming sound made him look up from his book. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting eerie shadows across the empty study hall. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes, assuming the building's old electrical system was acting up again. But the humming grew louder, more intense until the windows began to vibrate. Other students scattered throughout the library started looking around nervously. Someone whispered about checking the weather, thinking it might be an unusual storm. But Marcus felt something different in the air, an electric tension that made his skin crawl and his heart race. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light exploded outside the main windows. The entire building shook violently, sending books tumbling from shelves and students diving under tables. Emergency alarms began blaring, their shrill cry mixing with screams of confusion and terror. Marcus stumbled toward the window, his legs unsteady from the continued tremors. What he saw outside defied every law of physics he'd been studying. A massive metallic craft easily the size of 3 football fields hovered silently above the campus quad. Its surface gleamed with an otherworldly silver sheen, covered in patterns of pulsing blue light that seemed to flow like liquid electricity. The ship's design was unlike anything from Earth's technology. Smooth curves blended seamlessly with sharp angular sections, creating a form that was both beautiful and terrifying. Smaller vessels, each about the size of a city bus, detached from the main craft and began descending toward different buildings across campus. Panic erupted throughout the library as students and staff fled toward the exits. But Marcus remained frozen at the window, mesmerized by the impossible sight. His rational mind tried to process what he was seeing, cycling through explanations, military test, elaborate hoax, mass hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. One of the smaller craft landed directly in front of the library with surprising gentleness, its landing legs extending smoothly to touch the grass without leaving so much as a scorch mark. A section of its hull shimmered and became transparent, revealing figures moving inside. The beings that emerged were humanoid but clearly not human. They stood about 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs and graceful movements that suggested they came from a world with different gravity. Their skin had a pale, almost translucent quality, and their large eyes reflected the campus lighting with an unsettling intensity. They wore form-fitting suits that seemed to be made from the same material as their ship, and each carried devices that Marcus assumed were weapons, though their design was elegant rather than threatening. The aliens moved with purpose, spreading out across the campus in coordinated groups. Marcus watched as they approached various buildings, their behavior suggesting they were searching for something specific. They didn't seem hostile. No buildings were destroyed, no obvious violence occurred. Instead, they appeared to be conducting some kind of systematic investigation. His phone buzzed frantically with emergency alerts and messages from friends and family. News apps exploded with breaking reports of similar landings occurring simultaneously across major cities worldwide. The internet was already flooded with shaky video footage and wild theories about invasion, first contact, and the end of civilization. But as Marcus continued watching, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten with dread. The aliens weren't just searching randomly, they were collecting people. Small groups of humans were being escorted, not dragged, toward the waiting ships. The selected individuals seemed calm, almost peaceful, as if they were cooperating willingly. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't a random visit or scientific expedition. These beings had come to Earth with a specific agenda, and that agenda involved taking humans with them. A new sound cut through the chaos, a different kind of engine, smaller and more urgent. Another craft appeared in the sky, this one clearly damaged. Smoke trailed from one of its sides and its flight pattern was erratic, desperate. It was being pursued by 3 of the larger alien vessels. their weapons charging with ominous energy buildup. The damaged ship crashed into the campus courtyard with a tremendous impact that shattered windows across multiple buildings. Marcus could see it was a different design entirely. Sleeker, more advanced, with elegant curves that suggested it came from a completely different civilization than the first group of aliens. Emergency crews and remaining security personnel kept their distance, unsure how to respond to a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond any training or protocol they'd ever received. Marcus knew he should run, should get as far away from the chaos as possible. Every logical part of his mind screamed at him to flee. But something kept him rooted to the spot, watching as history unfolded in real time. The crashed ship's hull began to glow softly, and a section slid open with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. A figure emerged, moving with obvious difficulty. Even from his distance, Marcus could see this being was different from the others. Smaller, more delicate and clearly injured, the pursuing ships had landed, and their occupants were advancing on the crash site with weapons raised. Whatever was happening, Marcus realized he was witnessing something far more complex than a simple alien invasion. He was watching what appeared to be an intergalactic conflict, and Earth had somehow become the battleground. Marcus couldn't explain what happened next. Against every instinct screaming at him to stay safe, he found himself moving toward the stairwell. His legs carried him down 3 flights of stairs while his rational mind protested every step. The emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow, and the building's evacuation alarms created a soundtrack of chaos. The main floor was nearly empty, with only a few security guards trying to coordinate an evacuation that had already mostly completed itself. Marcus slipped past them through a side exit, using the confusion to avoid being stopped. The cool night air hit his face as he stepped outside, carrying the acrid smell of damaged electronics and something else, something alien. The campus quad was transformed into something from a science fiction nightmare. The massive mothership cast everything in shadow, its pulsing lights creating an otherworldly aurora across the buildings. Emergency vehicles lined the perimeter, their red and blue flashing lights seeming primitive compared to the alien technology dominating the sky. Marcus crouched behind a maintenance shed and tried to process what he was seeing. The aliens from the first ships, tall, pale beings he'd started thinking of as the hunters, had formed a perimeter around the crashed vessel. Their weapons hummed with contained energy, and their movement suggested military precision. But it was the figure near the crashed ship that captured his attention completely. The survivor was clearly female, though her species was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. She stood about 6 feet tall with a lithe, graceful build that suggested both strength and elegance. Her skin had a subtle, iridescent quality that shifted between silver and deep blue depending on how the light hit it. Most striking were her eyes. Large, intelligent, and currently filled with pain and determination, she clutched her left arm, which was obviously injured, and her breathing seemed labored. Despite her situation, she held herself with unmistakable dignity, like someone accustomed to command. The hunters were closing in, their leader calling out in a language that sounded like musical tones mixed with electronic harmonics. The female alien responded in the same language, her voice carrying clear defiance despite her obvious disadvantage. Marcus didn't understand the words, but the body language was universal. They were demanding her surrender and she was refusing. What happened next changed everything. The hunter leader raised his weapon, its energy building to what was clearly a lethal level. But instead of aiming at the female alien, he pointed it toward a group of human students who had been hiding behind an overturned campus security cart. The message was clear. Surrender, or innocent people would die. The alien princess, because that's what Marcus somehow knew she was, looked toward the threatened humans with obvious anguish. Her shoulders sagged as she realized her impossible choice. She began to raise her hands in surrender, her weapon clattering to the ground. That's when Marcus moved without thinking. His physics textbook was still clutched in his hands from his panicked exit from the library. In one fluid motion born of desperation rather than planning, he hurled the thick tome with every ounce of strength he possessed. The book struck the hunter leader squarely in the head, just as his finger tightened on the weapon's trigger. The energy blast went wild, shooting harmlessly into the sky instead of vaporizing innocent students. Chaos erupted instantly. The other hunters spun toward Marcus, their weapons swinging to target this unexpected threat. But the princess reacted faster than seemed possible. In one smooth motion, she dove, rolled, and came up with her weapon back in her hands. The firefight that followed lasted only seconds but felt like hours. Energy bolts scorched the air around Marcus as he dove behind a concrete planter. The princess moved like a dancer, somehow avoiding return fire while methodically picking off her attackers with precise shots. When the sudden silence fell, Marcus realized he was trembling uncontrollably. Smoke drifted across the courtyard from several small fires started by stray energy blasts. The hunter leader and two of his companions lay motionless, their weapons scattered across the grass. The princess stood in the center of it all, swaying slightly from exhaustion and injury. Her large eyes found Marcus where he crouched behind his inadequate cover. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the alien battlefield. Then she spoke. And impossibly, Marcus understood her words perfectly. Her voice was melodious, even weakened by pain, and carried an accent unlike anything he'd ever heard. "Why did you help me, young human? You could have been killed." Marcus stood slowly, his legs still unsteady. "I couldn't just watch them hurt innocent people. And you were trying to protect us too, weren't you?" A smile crossed her elegant features, the first expression of warmth he'd seen since this nightmare began. "You have wisdom beyond your years. I am Lyrelai of the House of Stars, 7th daughter of the Celestial Throne." "Marcus," he replied, feeling somewhat inadequate giving just his first name after such a formal introduction. "Marcus Chen. I'm a physics student." "Marcus Chen," she repeated as if testing how his name felt in her language. "You have saved not only my life but potentially the lives of countless others across multiple worlds." Before he could ask what she meant, alarms began blaring from the alien ships above. More vessels were appearing on the horizon, but these had a different configuration than the hunters. These new ships moved with the same elegant design aesthetic as the princess's crashed vessel. "My people," Lyrelai breathed, relief evident in her voice, "but they are still too far away, and there are more hunters coming." As if summoned by her words, new ships descended from the massive mother vessel. These were larger than the pursuit craft, bristling with what were obviously heavy weapons. "We must reach my ship," Lyrelai said urgently. "There are things aboard that must not fall into hunter hands. Information that could doom entire civilizations." Marcus looked at the distance between their position and the crashed vessel, then at the approaching enemy forces. The math was simple and terrifying. They'd never make it in time. But as he looked at this alien princess who had risked everything to protect strangers on a world that wasn't her own, Marcus realized that sometimes mathematics wasn't the most important factor in an equation. "Then we better run fast," he said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. Lyrelai's smile became brilliant despite their desperate circumstances. "I believe I chose my rescuer well, Marcus Chen of Earth." Running across an open courtyard while alien death machines descended from the sky was not covered in any of Marcus's textbooks. His lungs burned as he sprinted alongside Lyrelai toward her crashed ship, very aware that they made perfect targets against the campus's well-maintained lawn. The princess moved with fluid grace despite her injuries, her injured arm pressed against her side. She carried her weapon ready in her good hand, occasionally firing precise shots at hunter scouts who tried to flank their position. Each blast lit up the night with brilliant flashes of energy. "The ship's defenses are still partially operational," she called out between breaths. "Once we reach the hull, we should have some protection." Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what constituted some protection when facing technology that could vaporize buildings. His human perspective on defensive measures seemed woefully inadequate for the current situation. A hunter dropship landed between them and their destination, disgorging a squad of the tall, pale warriors. These moved differently than the first group, more aggressive, less methodical. Their weapons charged with an angry red glow instead of the blue energy Marcus had seen before. "Assault troops," Lyrelai hissed. "They care more about speed than precision." This turned out to be both good and bad news. The hunter assault troops fired rapidly but with less accuracy, allowing Marcus and Lyrelai to dodge between campus buildings and outdoor sculptures. However, their sheer volume of fire was turning the courtyard into a landscape of smoking craters and melted metal. Marcus dove behind a bronze statue of the university founder just as an energy bolt turned the man's head into molten slag. "So, much for the donation ceremony next week," he muttered, surprised that he could still find humor in their impossible situation. Lyra Lee appeared beside him, breathing hard but grinning at his comment. "Humans adapt to crisis with humor. I have read about this trait in our cultural databases. It is considered a sign of psychological resilience." "Your people study us?" Marcus asked while energy bolts scorched the air above their heads. "We study all developing civilizations, usually from a respectful distance. The hunters, however, prefer a more direct approach." She gestured toward the fallen statue. "They see potential slaves and resources to be harvested. My people see potential allies and friends to be protected." The distinction explained a lot about the current conflict, but Marcus didn't have time to process the full implications. The assault troops were advancing, their formation designed to prevent any escape route. That's when Lyra did something that fundamentally changed Marcus's understanding of the situation. She touched a device on her wrist, and suddenly her thoughts appeared directly in his mind. "Do not be alarmed." Her mental voice was warm and clear. "This is how my people communicate during combat. I am sharing my tactical awareness with you." Instantly, Marcus could perceive the battlefield the way Lyra did. He saw the energy patterns of approaching enemies, the structural weak points in nearby cover, and the optimal path to reach her ship. The information flowed into his mind, like downloading a file, but somehow his human brain processed it all without being overwhelmed. "Your species has remarkable mental adaptability." Lyra's thoughts continued. "Most beings require extensive preparation before they can handle direct neural interface." Marcus found he could respond through the connection. Maybe humans are better at adapting to impossible situations than you expected. Together they moved with coordination that seemed impossible for two beings who had met less than an hour ago. Marcus provided distraction by triggering motion sensors on campus lighting, creating false targets for the hunter assault troops. Meanwhile, Lyra used her superior knowledge of their technology to predict their movement patterns and position herself for maximum effectiveness. They leapfrogged between cover points, Marcus's knowledge of the campus layout proving invaluable in finding routes that avoided open killing fields. Lyra's tactical training allowed her to time their movements perfectly with the rhythms of enemy weapon recharge cycles. The crashed ship loomed larger as they approached, and Marcus could see details that hadn't been visible from the library window. The vessel was beautiful despite its damage, with organic curves that seemed to grow from mathematical principles rather than simple engineering. Symbols and patterns covered its hull, glowing faintly with their own internal light. "It is grown, not built," Lyra explained through their link as she sensed his fascination. "We nurture our ships from seed crystals over many years. Each one is unique with its own personality." 20 meters from the ship, disaster struck. A hunter heavy weapons team had circled around behind them, cutting off their retreat. Worse, the assault troops ahead had regrouped and were advancing with coordinated fire that made further progress impossible. Marcus felt despair creeping into his thoughts through the neural link. They were trapped between two forces with nowhere left to run. That's when Lyra shared something that changed everything about his understanding of the situation. "Marcus," her mental voice carried sudden urgency and hope. "You must understand something crucial about why this is happening. The hunters are not just invading Earth. They are specifically hunting me because of what I carry." Images flowed through the link. Vast star charts showing the locations of hundreds of civilizations, technical specifications for technologies that could transform entire worlds, and most importantly, the coordinates for something called the Heart of Stars. The Heart of Stars is a device left behind by an ancient civilization. It has the power to instantly transport fleets across galactic distances, or to create impenetrable barriers around entire star systems. Whichever side controls it will determine the outcome of this war. Marcus absorbed the implications with growing amazement and terror. "You're carrying the location of the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Not just the location, the access codes. I am the only being alive who can activate the Heart of Stars. If the hunters capture me, they will use it to enslave every civilization in this part of the galaxy, including yours." The weight of that responsibility settled on Marcus like a physical force. This wasn't just about rescuing an alien princess anymore. The freedom of countless worlds, including Earth, hung in the balance. But as he processed this information, Marcus realized something that even Lyrelai hadn't considered. Her ship's hull was covered with the same mathematical patterns he'd been studying in his physics textbooks. The geometric relationships, the energy flow diagrams, the quantum mechanical principles, they were all there, integrated into the ship's living structure. Lyrelai, he thought urgently, I think I understand how your ship works, and if I'm right, I know how to get us out of this. Through their neural link, Marcus shared his growing understanding of the mathematical principles governing Lyrelai's ship. Her amazement flooded back through the connection as she realized what he was suggesting. Impossible, she thought. These are concepts that take my people years of specialized training to comprehend. You learned them from primitive textbooks in a matter of hours? Not learned, Marcus corrected. Recognized. Your people express these principles as living technology, but they're the same quantum mechanics I've been struggling with all semester, just applied in ways we haven't figured out yet. The Hunter assault troops were closing in from both directions, their energy weapons charging for a final coordinated strike. But Marcus was no longer focused on the immediate tactical situation. Instead, he was analyzing the damaged sections of Lyrelai's ship, seeing patterns in the crystal growth that corresponded to mathematical formulas he'd memorized for his upcoming finals. The crash damaged your ship's navigation matrix, he explained through the link. But the quantum entanglement principles are still intact. If we can reach the central core and manually recalibrate the harmonic frequencies, you want to repair a starship using undergraduate physics? Lyrelai's mental voice carried disbelief mixed with desperate hope. Trust me, Marcus replied, surprised by his own confidence. Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions that expertise misses. They made their final sprint toward the ship's hull as energy bolts scorched the ground around them. The ship's defensive systems activated as they approached, creating a shimmering barrier that deflected the worst of the enemy fire. But Marcus could see the energy patterns fluctuating wildly. The defenses wouldn't hold for long. Lyrelai pressed her palm against a section of the hull, and it flowed open like liquid metal, revealing the ship's interior. The inside was even more extraordinary than the outside, with corridors that seemed to bend according to non-Euclidean geometry, and surfaces that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. The control chamber is this way, Lyrelai directed, leading him through passages that seemed to reshape themselves as they moved. The central chamber took Marcus's breath away. It was a perfect sphere about 20 feet in diameter, with no apparent floor or ceiling. Crystalline structures grew from every surface in fractal patterns that hurt to look at directly. In the center, suspended in midair, hung a complex arrangement of what looked like living diamonds. The ship's consciousness core, Lyrelai explained. It is dying from the damage sustained in the crash. Marcus could see she was right. The crystals that should have been blazing with inner light were dim and flickering. Several sections had gone completely dark, and cracks were spreading through the remaining active areas. But as he studied the patterns, Marcus began to see the underlying structure. It was like a three-dimensional representation of quantum field equations, with each crystal cluster representing a different aspect of space-time manipulation. I need to interface directly with the core, he told Lyrelai. Can your neural link technology connect me to the ship's consciousness? Lyrelai hesitated. That could be extremely dangerous. The ship's mind operates on frequencies that could damage human neural pathways. And if you make an error in the calculations, we'll all be dead anyway if the Hunters break through, Marcus pointed out. At least this way we have a chance. Outside the ship, the sounds of battle were intensifying. Through the neural link, Marcus could sense the approach of more Hunter forces, including some kind of massive siege weapon being deployed from the mothership. Lyrelai made her decision quickly. She guided Marcus to place his hands on specific crystal formations, while she activated additional neural interface protocols. The moment the connection established, Marcus's consciousness exploded outward. Suddenly he was the ship, feeling every damaged system, every failing subsystem, every drained energy reserve. The pain of the crash injuries became his own pain, and the slow dissolution of critical systems felt like dying. But he was also something more than the ship. Through the quantum entanglement principles woven into the vessel's core, he could sense the vast network of space and time around them. He could feel the gravitational signatures of distant stars, the quantum fluctuations that preceded hyperspace jumps, and the complex mathematics that governed faster-than-light travel. Most importantly, he could see exactly what was wrong and how to fix it. The ship's navigation systems hadn't just been damaged, they'd been deliberately sabotaged. The hunters had somehow introduced a quantum virus into the core during their pursuit, a subtle corruption that would eventually cause complete system failure. But Marcus could see the virus for what it really was, a mathematical error in the harmonic resonance frequencies. And mathematical errors could be corrected. Working through the neural interface, he began recalibrating the quantum field generators. It was like solving a three-dimensional calculus problem, while the equation itself was constantly changing. But the principles were fundamentally the same as the homework assignments he'd been struggling with all semester. Incredible, Lyralay's mental voice carried awe. You are performing calculations that would challenge our most advanced engineers. It's just physics, Marcus replied, though he was amazed at how natural it felt to manipulate forces that could tear apart reality itself. Really advanced physics. As he worked, the ship began to respond. Dead crystal clusters flickered back to life, and the spreading cracks stopped growing. Energy levels started climbing as the core regained its ability to process quantum energy efficiently. But the most dramatic change was in the ship's consciousness itself. What had been a dying whisper became a strong, clear presence that Marcus could feel through the neural link. The ship was not just alive, it was grateful, intelligent, and eager to help. Greetings, young human. The ship's mental voice was like singing crystals. I am called Swift Current Between Stars. You have given me new life, and I am in your debt. Through Swift Current's sensors, Marcus could see the tactical situation outside. The hunter siege weapon was nearly ready to fire, and the approaching rescue fleet from Lyralay's people was still too far away to help. But they no longer needed to wait for rescue. Swift Current, Marcus addressed the ship directly. Can you get us off this planet? With pleasure, young engineer. Where would you like to go? Marcus looked at Lyralay through the neural link, seeing her amazement and growing respect. But he also sensed something else, a weight of responsibility that she'd been carrying alone for far too long. Lyralay, he said, you mentioned that you're the only one who can activate the heart of stars. But what if you weren't alone? What if you had help from someone who understands the quantum mechanics but isn't bound by traditional approaches? Understanding flowed through their connection, followed by something that might have been relief. You would come with me? Leave your world, your life, everything you know? Marcus thought about his average grades, his average life, his average future doing average things on a planet that had just become a battlefield in an intergalactic war. My world just got a lot bigger, he replied, and I think this is exactly what I've been preparing for my whole life without knowing it. Swift Current Between Stars lifted off with a grace that belied its recent near-death experience. Through the ship's sensors, Marcus watched his university shrink away below them, the familiar campus becoming just another pattern of lights against Earth's surface. The hunter siege weapon fired just as they cleared the atmosphere, its massive energy beam carving a molten crater where the ship had been moments before. That was uncomfortably close. Swift Current observed with what Marcus was learning to recognize as the ship's dry sense of humor. They climbed rapidly through Earth's atmosphere, passing the Hunter mothership so quickly that its defensive systems barely had time to register their presence. Within minutes they were among the stars, with Earth becoming just another blue marble in the cosmic darkness. Your planet is beautiful, Lyralay commented through their shared neural link. I hope we can return it to peace when this conflict ends. Marcus was still adjusting to the reality of leaving everything he'd ever known behind. Through the ship's quantum sensors, he could perceive his homeworld as Lyralay did, a young civilization on the verge of reaching beyond its solar system, full of potential but terrifyingly vulnerable to forces like the Hunters. How many worlds have they conquered? He asked. Lyralay's thoughts carried deep sadness. Hundreds. The Hunters expand by identifying civilizations at the moment they develop interplanetary travel. They arrive, demonstrate overwhelming force, and offer a choice: submit to slavery or face extinction. Most choose survival, but not all. Some resist. The Valdorn fought for 30 years before their worlds were reduced to radioactive wastelands. The Crystal Singers created massive defensive barriers, but they fell when the hunters learned to corrupt their harmonic technology from within. Marcus absorbed this history while simultaneously marveling at how naturally he was interfacing with swift current systems. The ship's consciousness had fully integrated his neural patterns, allowing him to perceive space-time on levels that human science hadn't yet discovered. The Heart of Stars was created by the architects, Lyrelai continued. A civilization so ancient that most species consider them mythological. They built cosmic engineering projects, stellar forges, gravity wells that could move planets, machines that could ignite dead stars. Why did they disappear? No one knows. They simply vanished, leaving behind only their greatest works and cryptic messages about the burden of infinite possibility. The Heart of Stars is their most powerful surviving creation. Through swift currents navigation systems, Marcus could sense their destination, a star system so distant that its light would take thousands of years to reach Earth. But the ship was using principles of spacefolding that made such distances irrelevant. They would arrive in days rather than centuries. I am detecting pursuit, Swift Current announced. 6 hunter vessels, using their fastest interceptor designs. Lyrelai's tension flowed through the neural link. They know where we are going. The hunters have been searching for the Heart of Stars for generations. If they reach it before we do, they won't, Marcus said with conviction that surprised him. Swift Current, what are our options for losing the pursuit? The ship's consciousness touched his mind with something like approval. There are several possibilities, young engineer. The conventional approach would be to use evasive maneuvers and hope to reach our destination before they intercept us. However, your unique perspective on quantum mechanics suggests more creative alternatives. Marcus studied the pursuing ships through the sensors, analyzing their energy signatures and flight patterns. His human brain processed the information differently than either Lyrelai or Swift Current, seeing patterns that their more sophisticated minds had been trained to overlook. They're not just following us, he realized. They're herding us. Look at their formation. They're staying just close enough to keep us moving in a specific direction, but not close enough to risk actual engagement. You are correct, Swift Current confirmed with surprise. I had not perceived that pattern. They want us to reach the Heart of Stars, Lyrelai breathed. They know I am the only one who can activate it, so they are allowing us to lead them directly to it. The implications were staggering. The hunters weren't trying to capture them. They were using them as unwitting guides to the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Can we change course without making it obvious? Marcus asked. Not without alerting them to our awareness of their strategy, Swift Current replied. However, there may be another option. Young engineer, your quantum calculations have shown remarkable innovation. Could you perhaps solve the navigation equations for reaching our destination through unconventional routes? Marcus dove into the ship's navigation matrix, his consciousness expanding through crystalline pathways of pure mathematics. The standard route to the Heart of Stars was indeed heavily monitored, with Hunter listening posts along every major hyperspace lane. But as he studied the quantum topology of local space, Marcus began to see alternatives. Routes that folded space in ways that violated conventional wisdom about faster-than-light travel. Paths that used gravity wells and stellar magnetic fields as stepping stones across impossible distances. There, he announced, highlighting a route through his neural interface. If we use the neutron star in the Keras system as a gravitational slingshot, then fold space through the dark nebula using the quantum fluctuations from those protostellar formations, that route is considered impossible, Lyrelai protested. The gravitational stresses would tear apart any known ship. Any ship built using conventional understanding of structural engineering, Marcus corrected. But Swift Current isn't built, it's grown. The crystalline matrix can adapt to gravitational stress by changing its quantum resonance frequencies. Swift Current's excitement resonated through the link. The young human is correct. My structure can indeed adapt in ways that rigid metal constructions cannot. This route would be challenging but achievable, and completely unexpected by the hunters, Lyrelai added, her mental voice carrying growing hope. They would never anticipate such an approach. Marcus felt a moment of doubt as the magnitude of what he was suggesting sank in. He was proposing to navigate through cosmic phenomena that could destroy them instantly if he made even small errors in his calculations. But then he thought about the hunter's plan, about the countless civilizations that would fall if they gained control of the Heart of Stars. and about Earth's children who deserve to grow up free. Swift current, he said. Let's show these hunters what happens when human physics meets architect engineering. The ship's course change was subtle, but dramatic in its implications. Instead of following the well-mapped hyperspace routes, they dove toward the Charis neutron star, using its immense gravity well to catapult themselves across dimensions that technically didn't exist. Behind them, the Hunter pursuit fleet suddenly found themselves chasing shadows as their quarry simply vanished from conventional sensors. Beginning Phase 2 of navigation sequence, Swift current announced as they emerged from the gravitational slingshot, traveling at speeds that should have been impossible. Approaching Dark Nebula insertion point. Through the ship's sensors, Marcus watched the Dark Nebula grow from a smudge of cosmic dust into a swirling maelstrom of stellar formation. Protostars blazed within the gas clouds, their nuclear fires creating quantum fluctuations that could either power their journey or destroy them completely. "Ready, young engineer?" Swift current asked. Marcus took what might have been his last breath as an ordinary human physics student and committed his consciousness fully to the navigation matrix. Let's make history. The heart of stars defied every expectation Marcus had formed about ancient alien technology. Instead of a massive space station or planetary-sized device, it appeared to be a perfect sphere of crystalline material no larger than a small moon, hanging in the void at the center of an empty star system. But appearances were deceiving. Through Swift current's enhanced sensors, Marcus could perceive the true scope of the architect creation. The sphere existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, its surface area actually infinite, despite its finite appearance. Space-time bent around it like fabric around a massive weight, creating gravitational anomalies that had cleared the entire star system of planets and debris. "The hunters are already here," Lyra Lee observed with grim satisfaction. "But they arrived only moments before us thanks to your unconventional navigation." A massive hunter fleet surrounded the heart of stars, hundreds of ships arranged in precise geometric formations. At their center hung a dreadnought so large it dwarfed the ancient sphere, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. "Swift current, can you get us to the activation chamber without being detected?" Marcus asked. "The heart of stars is generating quantum interference patterns that will mask our approach," the ship replied. "However, once we begin the activation sequence, every hunter in the system will converge on our position." Lyra Lee shared her memories of the activation chamber through their neural link. It was located at the exact center of the sphere, accessible only through dimensional corridors that phased between realities. The chamber itself contained the architect control systems, devices, that responded to quantum consciousness patterns rather than physical manipulation. "I have studied the activation protocols for most of my life," Lyra Lee explained as they approached the sphere's surface. "But I have always known that attempting it alone would be suicide. The quantum feedback from the heart systems requires multiple consciousness patterns working in perfect harmony. That's why the architects built it that way," Marcus realized. "They designed it so that no single individual could wield ultimate power. It requires cooperation." Swift current phased them through the sphere's surface using principles that made Marcus's understanding of quantum mechanics feel primitive. They emerged in a corridor that seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions, its walls covered with flowing symbols that conveyed meaning directly to the mind. "The writing tells the story of the universe," Lyra Lee translated. "The birth of stars, the evolution of consciousness, the rise and fall of galactic civilizations. But it also contains warnings." Marcus could sense the weight of those warnings as they moved deeper into the heart of stars. The architects hadn't disappeared, they had transcended, leaving behind their physical forms to become something beyond current understanding. But their final message was clear. Power without wisdom led to destruction, and wisdom required humility. The activation chamber was a sphere within a sphere, its walls lined with crystal matrices that hummed with barely contained energy. At the center floated a complex arrangement of geometric forms that hurt to look at directly, control systems that existed in too many dimensions for human eyes to properly process. "The Hunter dreadnought is beginning its approach," Swift current warned. "They have detected our presence within the heart of stars." Through the neural link, Marcus could sense Lyra Lee's fear and determination in equal measure. She moved to the primary control matrix, her hands hovering over crystals that pulsed with inner light. Marcus, she said, I need you to interface with the secondary systems. The quantum calculations required are beyond any single mind, but together. Marcus placed his hands on the designated crystals, feeling the heart of stars' consciousness flow into his mind. It was vast beyond comprehension, an intelligence that spanned galaxies and perceived time on cosmic scales. But underneath its alien nature, Marcus sensed something familiar. The same love for mathematical elegance and physical law that had drawn him to physics in the first place. Greetings, young ones. The heart's voice resonated through their shared consciousness. I have waited eons for beings worthy of my power to arrive. But I must warn you, the choice you make here will echo across the galaxy for millions of years. The control systems came alive at their touch, displaying holographic representations of entire galactic sectors. Marcus could see the scope of the Hunter expansion. Hundreds of conquered worlds, billions of enslaved beings, entire star systems stripped bare to feed their war machine. But he could also see the potential for change. With the heart of stars' power, they could create impenetrable barriers around threatened worlds, instantly transport rescue fleets across vast distances, or even relocate entire civilizations to safer regions of space. The choice is not whether to stop the Hunters, the heart explained. The choice is what to become after you possess ultimate power. Through the chamber's sensors, Marcus watched Hunter assault troops breaking through the sphere's outer defenses. They would reach the activation chamber within minutes. We have to decide now, he told Lyreley. But whatever we choose together. Lyreley's resolve flowed through their connection. Then let us choose to be worthy of the trust placed in us. Together, they began the activation sequence. Marcus handled the quantum mechanical calculations while Lyreley provided the consciousness patterns needed to interface with architect technology. The Heart of Stars responded to their combined efforts, its power building exponentially. But instead of unleashing that power as a weapon, they made a different choice. Working together, they programmed the heart to create a galaxy-wide communications network, allowing every conquered civilization to coordinate resistance efforts. They established sanctuary zones around developing worlds like Earth, protecting them from Hunter expansion. Most importantly, they created escape routes, dimensional corridors that could evacuate entire populations from worlds under attack. The Hunters burst into the activation chamber just as the sequence completed, their weapons raised to kill the two beings who had just rendered their empire obsolete. But the Heart of Stars had one final gift for its new guardians. As the Hunter weapons fired, reality folded around Marcus and Lyreley, transporting them instantly to Swift Current's bridge as their ship materialized in normal space, light years away. Through the quantum network they had established, they watched as the Hunter fleet found themselves suddenly isolated, their communications jammed, their supply lines cut, and their conquered territories rising in coordinated rebellion. It is over, Lyreley said, exhaustion and relief evident in her mental voice. The galaxy is free. Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about Earth and all the worlds he had never seen but helped protect. He was no longer an ordinary physics student struggling with homework. He was Marcus Chen, guardian of the Heart of Stars, protector of civilizations. But more than that, he was proof that sometimes the most important qualifications for saving the galaxy were a willingness to help others and the ability to see solutions that experts missed. What happens now? He asked. Lyreley's smile was radiant through their neural connection. Now we go home, all of us, to every world, to every civilization that thought they would never be free again. Even Earth? Especially Earth. Your world has earned its place among the stars, Marcus Chen, and it will need guides who understand both human nature and galactic responsibility. As Swift Current set course for Earth, Marcus realized that his ordinary life was truly over, but the extraordinary life that had replaced it was just beginning. And somewhere in the quantum depths of the Heart of Stars, the architects watched their successors with approval, knowing that their greatest creation had found worthy guardians at last.